And the whole Apple store's crashed.
Boom, boom.
But all
Except
right.
that actually isn't a joke.
Oh, man.
Funny anyway.
Yes, indeed.
Hi, everybody.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome wherever you're coming from. Welcome to another edition of the Digital Download,
Which is
the longest running weekly business talk show on LinkedIn Live. This week on the Digital Download, we're going to be talking about decision making under uncertainty and conflict.
Ooh.
And if anyone has introduced uncertainty to this week's episode, it's certainly me. So if you see me a bit frazzled, please be patient. We will get you up and running as fast as possible. We're coming to you live in part from Startup Boston Week, which has been an amazing event for tech startup founders, VCs, and students at Suffolk University here in Boston. And it has also kept me quite busy. So I apologize in advance for any technical delays or snafus, guffaws, bad jokes. No, that's credit to Adam. So this week on the Digital Download, we'll have a special guest, Doug Noll, lawyer turned peacemaker, trainer, and speaker. Doug is dedicated to helping people manage intense confrontations. He's the author of De-Escalate, How to Calm an Angry Person in 90 Seconds or Less. And he'll explain to us how we can learn to solve a problem without anger. Before we bring Doug on, let's go around the horn with some introductions. Adam, would you kick us off, please?
I'm Adam Gray. I'm co-founder of DLA Ignite, and I'm loving the irony of having somebody in the dock on here today.
Yeah.
In the dock, D-O-C-K, is that?
Yeah, D-I-C-K.
That's a British thing. What do you mean?
Yeah, so it's where the defendant goes when the judge puts on their funny hat and says, "Send him down," and they take you away with the matching bracelets.
It's early yet, but yes, that's coming. Thank you, Adam. Alex.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Alex Abbott, the founder of Sapiro. I am looking forward to this session very much, and I'm also I am a proud partner of DLA Ignite. No one said that yet.
No one has.
There's only been me here, so yeah.
Thank you, Alex. Welcome. And Tim.
Hi, I'm Tim Hughes. I'm the CEO and co-founder of DLA Ignite, famous for the book Social Selling Techniques to Influence Buyers and Changemakers. And I started feeling a little, if you have imagination and if I've got a judge, I kind of feel that I'm in an orange jumpsuit.
Although that is a lovely pink. I for me anyway.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether it's a pink or an orange, but it kind of feels.
I think it's called salmon, isn't it? That's what they refer to that color.
Or sherbet.
Yeah,
sorbet.
Sherbet.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. Myself, I am Rob Durant, founder of Flywheel Results, helping startups scale. And I too am a proud DLA Ignite partner. All right, so in just a moment, we're going to bring Doug onto the show. He's going to explain how we can learn to solve a problem without anger. He teaches us how to be able to stand in the presence of very strong emotions and say exactly the right thing in exactly the right way, in exactly the right moment. Before I read his whole book to you, let me just bring Doug on and have him introduce himself. Doug, welcome. Welcome to the Digital Download.
Welcome, Doug.
Thank you for being here.
Doug. Nice to meet you.
Gentlemen. Thank you.
Doug, tell us a little bit about yourself, if you would, please.
Sure. I am a native Californian. I grew up in Southern California in affluence, went to Dartmouth College, and after college came back to California, went to law school, clerked for a judge for a year, ended up being a trial lawyer, commercial and business trial lawyer.
I may need one of those.
Yeah, I did that for 22 years, tried a lot of cases, won big, lost big, and through a unique series of events, came to the conclusion that being a trial lawyer was not my calling. And so I ended up going back to school in mid-career to earn my master's degree in peacemaking and conflict studies. And that changed my life. I left the practice, left my firm, $10 million on the table in 2000 to start my own mediation and peacemaking practice. And I've been doing that work ever since. In 2005, I had an epiphany about how to de-escalate people, and in a very difficult mediation. And I successfully helped a couple calm down to solve a problem that they needed to solve. And what I learned was that emotions are everything. And I'll explain more about that in a moment. But it turns out that 2 years later, a brain scanning study came out of Matthew Lieberman's lab that it showed why in the human brain we respond so well to this concept known as affect, A-F-F-E-C-T, affect labeling. And that led me to start teaching this to lawyers and judges and mediators around the world. And then in 2010, with my colleague Laurel Coffer, we co-founded Prison of Peace, which was a project where we started in the largest, most violent women's prison in the world, training women serving life and long-term sentences how to become peacemakers and mediators to stop prison violence. And the core skill we taught them was this very profound type of reflective listening, and the results were transformative. And today, Prison of Peace is in 15 California prisons, a prison in Connecticut, 15 prisons in Greece, and a prison in northern Italy. And in California, over 700 of our students have been released on parole in the last 12 years. Not one of them is reoffended. We have a zero recidivism rate. And it's because of these skills, because they're so powerful. And as you learn and master these skills, you change as a human being. And I know every single person, I've trained thousands of people how to do this, and to a person, after 6 or 8 weeks of training and practice, they've got it, and their lives change forever in a really positive way. And my promise to my clients is master these skills and you'll never have a fight or argument again in your life.
Wow.
Yes, you will.
You're a little frustrated and angry.
No, I mean that's wonderful, because let's be honest, the world needs more of that, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It needs more listening and compromising rather than digging in your heels and having to have your own way.
This is the foundational skill of life. It's interesting. My evolution has been interesting. I started out as a trial lawyer, resolving conflict through litigation, and then I became a mediator and peacemaker, where I was stepping into conflict to help people solve their problems. And now I'm teaching people how to prevent conflict in the first place.
How much is it about the words you're using versus other things?
Well, there's a script that I've developed that structures the way that you talk to somebody who's emotionally angry or upset. And if you follow the script, or you adopt the script, you adapt and change the script for every circumstance, but there's a basic script you follow. And once you learn that script, then that's all you need to know. And you just sort of roll through the script and watch how people react to it and then adjust accordingly. So it's really quite straightforward.
Because the first thing that most people do when they're in conflict or something like that is tell the other person to calm down, don't they?
Right. That's the worst thing you can say.
Which is the worst thing you can say, yes.
Yeah, my wife taught me that.
That's a form of emotional invalidation. And so we see emotional invalidation all over the place. Emotional invalidation occurs whenever we tell somebody who's emotional that they shouldn't be emotional. I mean, we can all remember as little boys running around, falling down, skinning our knees, starts to bleed, and we start to cry. And what are we told? Suck it up. It doesn't hurt. Don't cry. Be a man. Don't be a girly girl, right? Those are the most abusive things an adult can say to a child, because it's telling the child not to feel. And all the research shows that when you tell a child over and over and over again, don't feel, don't have emotions, they basically stop their emotional maturation process. It gets blocked at about between 6 and 8 years old, and they never mature emotionally. And so they get into adulthood and they build up this big facade of being competent. Maybe not. Maybe they become drug addicted. I mean, they're extremes. But whenever they get into an intense conflict, they don't know how to handle it. And so they become reactive and they revert back to the last programming they learned, which is at 6 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that the vast majority of adults suffer from that problem. It's called adult normative alexithymia, and it's pervasive and dangerous.
Is it a chemical reaction in the brain that's happening, or is it something else?
It's not just neurochemicals. It's a whole systemic. It involves the polyvagal system. It involves the emotional centers of the brain. Basically, what the brain scanning studies show is that when you affect label, when you tell somebody what they're feeling, the emotional centers of the brain are inhibited. At the same time, the right ventrolateral prefrontal cortex, executive function, is activated. So as I teach my students, what we're basically doing is lending this upset person our prefrontal cortex for the 90 seconds or so that it'll take their prefrontal cortex to come back online. And although there's no science yet around this, I think what's going on, if I grab ideas from people like Lisa Feldman Barrett at Northeastern University, I think what's happening is that when we become highly emotional, the emotional centers of our brain become activated. They overwhelm the prefrontal cortex. This we know that. And then it loses connection with its ability to process emotions, because it loses connection with what's known as the emotional database. And this is a database that we have, for lack of a better word, that connects the feelings of affect that we have, which are pleasantness and unpleasant, with words or cognitive concepts that describe all these different feelings that we can have. And once we lose connection with that, we don't have any way of processing what we're experiencing. And so now we're just reactive machines. And once we get the prefrontal cortex back online, reconnected to the emotional database, we can process the emotions, and now we can start making better choices.
Yeah, you mentioned something, polyvagal system.
Polyvagal
used a
system.
few words that meant very little to me.
Well, the brain has to be connected to the eyes and the mouth and the vocal cords and the ears and everything else somehow.
Okay.
And it happens to be through what's known as the vagus nerve. And there are two parts of the vagus nerve, the myelinated vagus nerve and the unmyelinated vagus nerve. And this is all based on the work of Stephen Porges, who's a scientist at the University of Illinois. And so the vagus nerve is part of the system that gets us into the fight or flight response, which you've all heard about. It's not just the amygdala, it's the whole systemic part of it. And it's the vagus nerve that connects the brain to all these other parts of our body that respond to emotional situations. And so one of the things we want to do to stay calm is we want to keep what's known as the myelinated vagus nerve. We want to keep that system online, because that's the social system. That's when we're going to approach, and we're going to be social and we can get along with people. If that goes offline, then the brakes come off the unmyelinated vagus nerve, and that's when we get into the fight or flight response, and we freeze up, or we run, or we fight back.
Yeah.
And this is all how it's all connected. Everything's connected. The ankle bone's connected to the head, so to speak.
I find it so interesting. I can see my wife's listening, and so I think about me in a situation of conflict. I tend to be quite calm and reserved, trying to process what the hell's going on, and she'll be straight up there with her dukes ready,
right,
to take anyone on. And this is exactly what you're talking about. That's what's going on in each of our bodies.
That's right. And what I've discovered is that we as human beings are highly predictable. We have a very, very small repertoire of behavior, especially of conflict behavior. And once you know what to look for, and you can see the emotions that people are experiencing, it becomes not only predictable, but now it becomes there's something we can do with it. Now we have tools that will allow us to look at this emotionality, and instead of getting upset or reactive or being anxious, which is what most people do, now I have a set of tools that I can use where I can be very calm and cool and collected, and have inner peace, and at the same time have compassion for this upset person and calm them down in less than 2 minutes, 90 seconds. It's extraordinary. It's extraordinarily powerful.
Yeah.
One of the things that we talked about before when we met discussing this show, and I've seen actually on your website as well, as you say, we are 90%, 98% emotional and only 2% rational.
Right.
But we spend 98% of our time learning to be rational and less than 2% of our time learning to be emotionally competent.
Right.
But I'm in sales. How can I remain calm and still remain in control of a negotiation?
It's very simple. You first of all recognize that we've been fed a myth for 4,000 years that what separates us from other species is reasoning and rationality. I mean, Aristotle said that, so did Plato. A bunch of people said that. It's wrong. It's not true. We are not 98% emotional. We are 100% emotional. Every decision we make is an emotional decision. We have tools such as critical thinking and reasoning and logic, scientific method, quantitative, qualitative methods, different kinds of algorithms that we learn as children, like multiplication tables. All of that is knowledge and tools for solving problems. But that problem-solving ability does not define who we are. We are ultimately all emotional beings. So if you're in sales, for example, the first thing you have to recognize is that you're emotional and you're going to have emotional reactions. And the people that you are working with, that you want to sell something to, they're going to make their decision is going to be an emotional decision, which they will overlay, of course, they will justify and explain, but fundamentally, it's an emotional decision. And as I teach salespeople these skills, I say for the first 10 minutes of any meeting, do not say a word. Listen to them and reflect their emotions.
Good luck with that.
Build a rapport. Do not try to sell them anything. Listen to them. Listen to what they're feeling. What are they experiencing emotionally right now? And when you do that, they will feel deeply heard and validated. They will feel understood, and you will build instant trust and instant loyalty. And they will want to do business with you because you took the time to really hear them and understand them. And that's very rare that people have that experience.
Agreed. It's often said in sales that people buy with emotion and then rationalize it with facts.
True. It's true. It's absolutely true. And I mean, there's a ton of science to support that. So, and yet, what do we see salespeople do? They walk in and all they want to do is talk about them and their product and how great their product is and differentiation. And this is why I'm so cool. And this is why you should buy from me. They're trying to sell on logic, but without even understanding the decision-making process is an emotional decision. And so what they should be learning how to do is work with emotions before they ever get to any kind of presentation about the product or service. And yet no one does that.
Because if you think about people's presentations, and we talk a lot about people's position on social media, what they do is that they get comfortable talking about facts. With a number one or with we've been in the market for 10 years.
Right. And I'm not saying I'm a lawyer. I mean, facts are important. But however, if you are interested in influencing people, if you're interested in helping people, you've got to start at the emotional level. All communication is emotional. And those are skills. And the beauty of it is these skills are not hard to master. I mean, in my trainings, people master them 6 to 8, maybe 10 weeks at the most. And they got them. So it's not like you got to go off and do 20 years of therapy or go off to a mountain somewhere and find a monk. It's that once the difficulty in learning the skills is that they're counterintuitive and counternormative. And so you have to overcome, most of my students have to overcome their conditioning and training around listening, because the way they learned how to listen is wrong. And so what I teach seems to fly in the face of conventional, it just flies in the face of conventional wisdom. But follow the science. This is what the science says to do, and it works.
What are we doing wrong when it comes to listening then?
Well, I think the way that I can answer that is saying there's two types of listening. There's type 1 listening and type 2 listening. Type 1 listening is the kind of listening that most of us engage in, and that's where it's listener focused. I'm really interested only in me. And this is the way, for example, most salespeople are. I'm only interested in making the sale. I could really give a rat's ass about you, right? Even though you're going to buy the product, I'm really interested in making the sale to get my commission. Or we're in a conversation and somebody's saying something and all we're doing is we're thinking about the next thing we're going to talk about and we're really not listening to them. Or if you're in my former business as a lawyer, you'd be listening to people get facts and information to make decisions and give advice or think about what to do next. That's all type 1 listening, totally listener focused on the listener's agenda. For example, people say, empathy, ask questions. No, don't ask questions. That's totally non-empathetic. That's all about your agenda, soothing your own anxiety around somebody else's upset, as opposed to type 2 listening. And in type 2 listening, it's completely different. In type 2 listening, the listener is focused on the speaker and needs the speaker to be heard from the speaker's frame of reference. So there is no agenda as a listener in type 2 listening. And you may be listening to the words, you may be listening to intended meaning, or you may be listening to emotions, or you may be listening to all three, and you are going to reflect to the speaker using a you statement what the speaker has said, intended to mean, and felt using a you statement.
So give an example of that.
So Adam, I might say, supposing you're upset, I might say, hey man, Adam, you are really pissed off. You're really angry, you're frustrated. You feel completely disrespected and ignored. And you feel unappreciated and unsupported. You're kind of worried about it and upset and sad because you want connection and it's not there. And you're in this group and they betray you and abandon you and you're rejected and you feel completely alone. And sometimes you feel completely worthless.
Wow. I wasn't even the one you were talking to, and I'm in it.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
I feel completely worthless and disrespected. And not listened to. You hit the nail on the head there, Doug.
Yeah. So notice what I did. No questions. I did not use an I statement. I used a you statement. In this case, I was doing deep reflective listening using affect labeling, and I just reflected your emotions, working from there's a sequence you follow when you do this, from least invasive to most invasive in terms of the emotions that you express. So if you were really upset, Adam, just me doing that you would be completely calmed down. So you probably all felt a shift as I was talking to you. You felt,
yeah, yes.
This guy gets me, and I'm not even upset. That's my point. That's the power of this. Our brains automatically respond to this kind of listening, and this is type 2 listening. And what we don't teach is we don't teach people type 2 listening. We really don't even learn type 1 listening. We just sort of get it by osmosis. And it's the type 2 listening that's the most powerful, that's going to bring peace into people's lives.
But isn't there a risk though with that? So what you did there, and I know that was an illustration,
mm-hmm.
but I was angry or upset, and I was angry or upset about the fact that I hadn't had a chance to say my piece yet, and you began with that, and you got deeper and deeper and deeper, and finished up with basically saying you should be feeling utterly worthless.
No, that's not what I said.
No, that isn't what you said. But I could feel myself, yes, calming down and feeling understood.
Right.
Like I said, I know it was an illustration, but I wasn't feeling worthless. But I do feel a little bit worthless now.
Most people, feeling worthless is, I did this as an illustration to show how deep you can go. And what you do is when you learn these skills, you learn which
floor to get off at.
Yeah, and for example, in a business context, I would never do that in a business context. There's 7 layers of emotion. Anger, the first 3 layers are anger, disrespect, and fear. And that's in a business context, that's as deep as I would go. Right. But then you can go deeper. You go from fear, you go into disgust, shame, sadness, and abandonment. And all emotional, everything starts with abandonment. Now, that's the deepest layer. It's most invasive. But people, from the time they're small children, have had experience, even in the most loving families, have experienced abandonment. They've experienced rejection. They've experienced loneliness. They've been told or experienced that they're worthless or that they're unlovable. That doesn't mean it's true. That's just what they've experienced. And we have to separate out what people experience versus truth. We don't care whether it's true or not. All we care about is that this is the emotional experience you're having in this moment, and you need to be validated. You need to be heard at that level to process that emotion.
We actually see, not that deep, but we see a lot of that when we work with individuals, getting them to be more social. And often we say, the problem is at a very deep level, very few people feel that they have something to say that the world wants to hear. And
that's right. They don't feel heard. They feel ignored.
Yeah. And you can see everybody's nodding along with that. And that's right. And that's one of the inhibitors that we have to remove when we're working with people, or try to.
That's right. So if you're a leader, for example, you're an executive and you've got a team of people that you're working with, you use these tools to make sure that your introverts feel deeply heard and understood. And that gives them the safety to speak out and talk about what's important to them, which could be critical to the team. But if you use type 1 listening, which is what most leaders use, those introverts are going to shut up. They don't feel emotionally safe, and they're not going to volunteer anything. And their idea is, I just don't call on me in this meeting. I want to hide under the table. And you're losing all that brain power because you're not taking the time to connect with people in a way that makes them feel safe, heard, and willing to share. Because you've got to have this trust. And that's why this stuff is so powerful.
So you mentioned seven
layers of emotion.
Layers. I didn't know if we use the word layers there or not. Is there a converse to each of those? So if you're feeling this and you want to feel that, do you speak to the converse, or do you just simply acknowledge where they're at?
I just acknowledge where they're at.
Okay. And we have a question from the audience as well. Andrew Slesser had asked, is the difficulty not more separating emotion in our actions and taking it personally?
Let's see, how do I answer that? So what you learn as you master these skills, what you learn is that let's say somebody yelling at me and they're insulting me and being incredibly disrespectful and spitting at me and just really mad. In the old days, I would have taken that personally. I would have felt a lot of anxiety, and I probably would have gotten angry. And I'm a big man. I'm a secondary black belt, so it's really not good to piss me off, right? I can hurt somebody. Today, somebody gets angry. I haven't had this ever happen to me, but let's just say somebody gets really angry at me, or they get frustrated. I see this in my mediation work a lot. Lawyers get frustrated, and so they get frustrated not at me, but at the process. And I don't take that personally at all. I say this person, this lawyer in this moment is having an emotional moment. She's frustrated. She's upset. She feels disrespected. She doesn't feel heard. And she's feeling anxious because the negotiation is not going the way that she expected it to. And, I can just work through all the layers that this lawyer is experiencing. And I don't have to say anything. I can just feel what she's experiencing. And all of a sudden now I can approach her at an emotional level. She doesn't even know that I'm doing that, but I can approach her at an emotional level without taking it personally, without getting upset, and help her process through the problem so that she can give good advice to her client. I mean, this is kind of the work as a mediator. This is the work I do every day. And it's very common to have one side come in at a very low number in a negotiation. The other side comes in at some astronomical number that's totally absurd and ridiculous. And have the lawyers on both sides, they feel having strong emotions. They're angry, they're frustrated, they feel disrespected. They don't feel like they're being heard by the other side. They think the other side is dissing them. They feel they're anxious and fearful that the case isn't going to settle because they really don't want to try the case, and they feel concerned about their client relations. I mean, a whole bunch of emotions are going to happen in these negotiations. And I know what those emotions are. And because I can recognize them, I can address them. Maybe not by affect labeling, but by how I respond to that rather than taking it personally or dismissing it or trying to go to logic or trying to explain, I can couch my responses from an emotional perspective that allows them to feel heard and also calm down to get back into a professional place where they can make a better professional judgment.
Yeah, that's the key, isn't it? It's because when there's chaos in their mind because of the emotion, they can't make that rational choice or decision.
That's right. And that's true for every human. So you learn when you learn how to read emotions and reflect emotions, you no longer take anything personally.
But this is potentially more than just mediating, isn't it?
Oh, it's everything. It's life.
This is about every single thing where somebody needs to make a decision about anything at all.
About anything.
Yeah.
Or not only make a decision, but they're just upset. So, you in your family life, you got children or you got a spouse and somebody gets upset. They're going to blame the safest person in the room, you, even though you haven't done anything wrong. And now all of a sudden you're getting, hey, why are you poking holes at me? I didn't do anything wrong. But if you learn to recognize, oh, you're having an emotional moment. I need to be present for you in your emotional moment. It's not about me. It's about you.
As a word of warning,
Don't do that to his wife.
Sorry. What did you say?
I said, don't say that to his wife.
No, exactly. I was just thinking, my wife isn't a second Dan black belt. However, if I were to say, "Oh, it's all right, darling, you're having an emotional moment," she would treat me as if she were. And
that's right. And you would not say that. You would not say you're having an emotional moment, because that is an emotional put down. That's an invalidating statement. You would say, let's say she's angry. You'd say, you're really angry. You're frustrated. That's all you would say. You're just really angry and frustrated. And her brain cannot help respond to that in an appropriate way. It will automatically start to de-escalate her. She can't help herself. And she will say, yeah, I'm angry. And then you can continue to de-escalate her if that's appropriate, or you can say, so what's going on? And now you can move into problem solving. De-escalate, then problem solve. Too often people want to problem solve to de-escalate. That never works.
Yeah, because that assumes that we are logically led rather than emotionally led, doesn't it?
That's right. That's why they said we're emotional beings.
Mm.
We're not logical beings at all.
But
we can use logic as a tool, but we're not logical beings. That's not who we are inherently. We are not inherently logical. We are emotional. However, we do have a whole bunch of tools we can use to solve problems, like logic and critical thinking. And
I can honestly say that I've been around for 56 years, and for the first time in the last 10 minutes, it's all starting to make sense now.
Well, you're right, Adam, and this is the first mindset shift that my students have to make, is to recognize our emotionality. And once they make that mindset shift, all of a sudden the veil is lifted and it becomes clear. People are not acting irrationally. They're not being stupid. They're just being emotional. And most people don't have good emotional control. So we just see that their just emotionality is out there. They can't self-regulate very well. And so that's just the way they are. And that's how they're being. And fortunately, I know how to respond to that. So I feel safe. And I can approach this person with compassion and help them calm down, so that we can then talk about what it is that caused the emotionality in the first place.
What do you say to the student that says, well, it's not me, it's always the other guy causing the problem?
So let's just step back a second. So that student is frustrated, feels disrespected, does not feel appreciated or supported or heard, feels like he or she is the one that's always being blamed. So it feels anxious and worried and concerned about the fact that I'm the target when I shouldn't be. If you want to go deeper, feels some embarrassment about that. Probably feels upset, stressed, maybe unhappy. If it's a deep enough problem, despair. And at the bottom is feeling rejected and lonely because you're getting blamed for something that doesn't seem to be your fault. So don't worry about the other guy. Worry about the emotions of the person that you're talking to in the moment.
And I guess the follow-up to that is really, does it, you've talked about in a negotiation and so on, and understanding the other's position. Does it really start with understanding my own emotional position and controlling that?
Interestingly, no. What I've learned in training thousands of incarcerated people, which, as you might imagine, have no emotional competence to begin with, is that we start by teaching how to listen to other people's emotions. And as you learn how to listen to and reflect others' emotions, you then start to change your own brain. You reprogram yourself and you become emotionally more self-aware of yourself. And then as you become emotionally more self-aware, you're able to emotionally self-regulate. So the easiest way to build emotional intelligence is not to learn emotional intelligence. It's learning about how to read and respond to other people's emotions. And you will retrain your own brain to then become aware of your own emotional states so that you can self-affect, you can label your own emotions and calm yourself down in any situation.
Interesting.
It's completely counterintuitive and opposite of everything
Yeah,
that you think.
exactly.
We've never done one of these where we've all just been sitting like sponges like this, just absorbing this. Because normally we've got some really intelligent comments to make, but here, I don't know about you guys, but I'm just sitting here thinking, this is absolutely transformational.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is absolutely transformational. You're
Yeah.
exactly correct.
Comments, yes. Intelligent, I question, Adam.
And rightly so.
So, Doug, how does anger impact our health, happiness, and performance?
Well, anger has a very important role in life. At least it did millions of years ago, right? Anger is the number one. Anger is all about boundary violations. You're encroaching on me. You're encroaching on my space. You're encroaching on my property. You're encroaching on something, and so the anger response is protective. And the problem is that in modern civilization, the response to a saber-toothed tiger attacking my clan is not an appropriate response in a civilized society, and yet our brains can't distinguish between a saber-toothed tiger and a social insult. Literally cannot make a distinction between the two. Only our prefrontal cortex can distinguish. And if the prefrontal cortex is offline because of emotional reactivity, then we're going to react the same way that we would react if a saber-toothed tiger were attacking. And the problem that we have, especially if we get into that kind of anger and we cannot control it, and this is something that's very interesting, is we are the only species on the planet that do not have an inhibitory anger response. Every other species of animals on the planet has an inhibitory anger response that prevents them, that species, or those con-species, from literally hurting each other.
So run that by me again.
Yeah. So let me phrase it this way. When you see wolves fighting, they're not fighting to kill each other. They're fighting for dominance. And when the alpha male, the winner of the males fighting wins, the other wolf rolls over onto his back and extends his neck, and the wolf takes a little nip, doesn't even draw blood. Wolves do not kill each other.
Right.
Humans kill each other. And the reason for that, it's so interesting. We did not evolve with fangs or claws or talons or in biological weapons of our physical body like all other animals. So for millions of years, it was really hard for one human to kill another. I mean, you had to sneak up on somebody who was asleep with a rock and bash their brain in. I mean, really, that was the only way you could do it, or push somebody off. I mean, it's hard. And so we evolved as to collaborate and cooperate. One of the fundamentals of biological science is the species with the most mass wins. So if you can create biological mass, you have a much greater likelihood of pushing the genome into the future, which is the definition of evolutionary biological success. Well, how did humans create biological masses? We learned how to come together as a group to go hunting, for example. So if I could get the 4 of you guys to join with me on a hunt for an antelope, I just quintupled the mass. I got 5 times the mass I had before. And now I got to worry about Alex herring off and chasing a bunny rabbit because he can get instant satisfaction getting the rabbit. But if I can trust Alex to stay with the group, we'll have success in chasing that antelope and bringing back meat to the clan. That was how we evolved as cooperative, collaborative beings. And we didn't have a need for, we never evolved into the need for being predators in the sense that we had to have claws or teeth or whatever. And the problem we have today is that now we have all these weapons out there that can kill a lot of people, and we have no inhibitory response built into us to stop us from using those weapons, unlike any other species. And so when we see these mass shootings here in the United States and elsewhere, that's what we're seeing. What we're seeing is the ultimate evolutionary response, which is, since we don't have inhibitions against killing other people, and we produce weapons that allow us to do mass murder occurs. It's an obvious evolutionary endpoint.
There's an obvious question coming to that, but I won't ask it, seeing as we have 2 Americans on the call.
But, you know, we see it everywhere, don't we? We're seeing it in Russia and Ukraine at the moment.
Yeah, I mean,
in fact,
you see this. You know, I mean, whenever you look at violence between human beings, what we're seeing is, you know, there are a lot of dynamics. It's always a complex process, but fundamentally, we have devised tools of violence to assert power over somebody else, and we don't have a lot of inhibition against. I mean, so we do have. I got to say that humans have an aversion to killing other humans, and that's why. You know, we aren't all out killing each other. It's a fairly rare, although too common occurrence, where we have people out there murdering other people, for example. And in war, soldiers have to go from civilians to soldiers. They have to be conditioned into shooting other human beings, which is difficult. That's a difficult thing to learn.
Part of that is giving permission, though, isn't it?
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, and part of it too, if you're not a soldier, but part of it is, you know, how dysfunctional is your brain? I'm not saying soldiers are dysfunctional. I'm saying that people who engage in mass murder, for example, they all have dysfunctional brains. Their brains are screwed up. They're not
permission.
Yeah. So when we look at war, we understand that war is, I mean, how is it that people can do that sort of thing? And they're conditioned into it. They're trained into it, and they're given permission. And we have so-called rules of war that people are supposed to follow, and of course they don't. But the rules of war that make us feel better about the fact that we're doing huge violence on people, and we can say there are war crimes, and there are, but there's nothing much that can be done about it other than we tisk crime against humanity. Doesn't matter. You still raped the village. You know, I mean, come on.
Doug, you mentioned that we evolved as a cooperative, collaborative species.
Yes.
So would you say that's still our natural tendency? And if so, how do we lean into more of that? And I'm going to bring it back to like the business context.
Right.
In a sales context, how would we lean into a cooperative, collaborative stance?
I think it's a lot of its mindset, and a lot of it too comes back to listening. You know, the reason that we lose collaboration in a workplace, or we lose collaboration in a sales environment, is because we engage in type 1 listening, which is all about me and not about you. And we become ego driven. We become driven to achieve our own goals at the expense of everybody else. And we don't recognize that if I can listen and I can find out what your interests, needs, goals, and desires are, and I can understand what mine are, that we can probably craft a solution that satisfies all of our needs in a cooperative, collaborative way. It takes time. It takes a little more time and a little more effort, and we're not trained in how to do this. We're trained that this is a competitive, winner-take-all world, and that if we're not tough and mean and cruel, we're not going to succeed. All of that's just a myth. It's all BS. It's not true. And we're not trained as children how to negotiate. We're not trained how to work out our problems with other people. We just have to sort of learn this stuff ad hoc, and some people learn it better than others. And that's why there's so much chaos.
Yeah, we bribe our kids.
Yeah, I mean, we have two systems in our brain that oppose each other: the task focus system and the default mode or social mode. The task focus system is the part of our brain that engages in all this critical thinking and scientific method and quantitative analysis and all that. That's what education is all about, training the task focus system. But the task focus system is only on for about 2 or 3% of the day. The rest of the time we're in social mode. And it's the social mode where we have empathy and we learn to listen and we can communicate and we can collaborate and we can love each other and be present with each other. That's our social mode. What's interesting is these are antagonistic modes. When task focus is on, you can't be social. And when you're social, it's very hard to be task focused. How many times have you been working on a task or a computer or something and somebody comes in and interrupts you and you get a little bit surly because you've been interrupted? You know, you're not being social in that moment. You're totally focused because you're in task focused mode. What our educational system does not do, and what our families do not do, is teach children how to be in that social mode. All the appropriate skills that we need to be in order to be fully actualized human beings. And that's a huge, huge knock on our education system.
And what do we need to do to be more social rather than task oriented?
The simplest solution is to learn how to listen.
Right.
That's foundational. Once you learn type 2 listening, everything else just automatically falls into place. The solution is so simple and it's so easy to implement. I mean, like I said, 6 to 8 weeks, 1 hour a week, 6 to 8 weeks, you've got it mastered. It's not hard. It's like riding a bicycle. It's just that people don't think this way. As far as I know, I'm the only one that talks about this stuff. I haven't heard anybody else, and I get around. I haven't heard anybody else talking the way that I talk about. And so
I get around as well, Doug. And
yes, you do.
And there's other people that talk about mediation,
right?
But they don't talk about what you're talking about in
That's
terms
right.
of this.
And this is so foundational. It's so powerful. I mean, my belief is if I could get parents around the world to adopt these skills and use them on their kids, we would not have prisons in 20 years.
Wow.
I've worked with thousands of people in prison. And they were there because they were horribly abused. For the most part, they were horribly abused as children. I mean, the stories are unbelievable. No wonder you're in prison. Of course you're in prison. If we don't abuse our children, we're not going to have prisons.
Yeah. So what can people do to learn more beyond this hour that we've had with you, Doug?
Well, there are all kinds of places you can go to learn this stuff. I've got a book out, my 4th book, De-Escalate, How to Calm an Angry Person in 90 Seconds or Less. Go to Amazon, $13. It'll be there. You'll have it tomorrow. I've got a bunch of online courses on my website at dougnoll.com. You can go to my YouTube channel, The Power of Emotional Competency. I've got 50 or 60 YouTubes up that describe and show you actual live conversations of this sort of thing. You can, I do workshops, both virtual and in person, that teach groups how to do this stuff. And I do private coaching, where I'll take 2 or 3 people, 1, 2, or 3 people, and through an 8 to 10 week process, teach them how to master these skills. That typically the commitment to learning these skills, it's usually a 2 or 3 hour introductory workshop because you got to get the science to understand why this all works. And then it's just 1 hour a week for, like I said, 8 to 10 weeks of just practicing and going out and practicing the skills in the way that I described, because we want to start in very safe places so you don't embarrass yourself. And then you slowly, as you build your confidence, you develop the skill.
I just bought your book on Amazon while you were talking. Then
well, there you go. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I've got like something 300 reviews on Amazon. I mean, not many of them are negative. So this is life-changing stuff. And if you just take the time to invest a little bit of time and effort into yourself, you can change your life forever. Like I said, my promise to my clients is that you will never have a fight or argument again once you master these skills.
Yeah.
You talked about.
Sorry, Rob.
No, go
What's the book called again, Doug?
It's called De-Escalate.
Yeah.
Just
How
put
to calm an angry person in 90 seconds or less.
It's also in our show notes. So
If
for
you
anyone
go
that
to Amazon, just type in Douglas Noll, Noll, De-Escalate in the book.
You just need to put in de-escalate, and it's the first thing that comes back.
It'll come up,
So it's
Don't
in
get
Amazon.
frustrated, Alex.
And it's on my Kindle already.
Yeah, it's an audio, but you can get it on Audible. So it's my wife read the book, so you get to listen to her lovely voice. And paperback and Kindle, it's in 5 languages. So generally speaking, if you're anywhere in the world, you'll probably find the book in a language you can read.
Did you have a question, Rob?
I did. Doug, you mentioned we need to learn to listen better. And one of the thoughts that popped in my head was, what about in digital? What about in an asynchronous environment where somebody says something and I don't have the immediate opportunity to respond to them?
The research shows, and my personal experience shows, that you can calm somebody down in an asynchronous communication by simply labeling what they're feeling. And you can tell what they're feeling by, let's suppose it's in capital letters with exclamation points, right? Where people are shouting at you. It's not that hard to ascertain where people are in those 7 layers of emotions and just reflect back the emotions. On social media, on my YouTube channel, for example, every now and then I get snarky comments. I just say, oh, you feel really disrespected. You don't feel heard. You don't feel listened to. And you're really angry and upset. And, you feel sad and disconnected, and they go away.
I was rather thinking, following up on Rob's comment then, now I know exactly what to say to inflame the situation. So you feel really unlistened to and disrespected.
Yeah, if you want to do that.
Because you feel worthless, rightly so.
Yeah, you can do that too. Every tool has a second blade to it.
There you go.
So yeah, it works pretty well in texting, if you're on a telephone or a mobile phone, you can do it that way. Social media comments, just deal with the snarkiness by reflecting back the emotions they're feeling. If they're being snarky, they're emotional. Yeah. Go ahead.
I always find text is so unemotional.
If you start, it would seem that way until you start really looking at what's going on and ask yourself, what is this person feeling? And once you have the layers of emotions in place, you can very quickly ascertain these are the feelings this person is having. It's really quite easy to read.
Yeah. Or you can take it the wrong way quite easily as well.
If you don't know what to look for, you're right.
Yeah.
Again, if you're ignorant of how to read emotions, then you can easily misconstrue what people are saying. And to the point that somebody made in the audience, you can take it personally, which gets you reactive. And now you're filtering information through your anger, which usually means not good things, as opposed to staying calm and collected and cool.
I think Andrew's last comment is really good. So, and I don't mean this as an apology. Normally, we get loads of banter going on here, and we get loads of comments from the audience and loads of comments from us. But this really has been a school day. I'm sitting here and I've got nothing. If I'm making comments, it's for the sake of making comments, not because there's something that I feel that I can add to the conversation. This is absolutely incredible stuff.
I think that quite often what happens on podcasts, and I see that on my own, which is that some subjects people basically sit back and listen, and others when they so I've interviewed somebody. I found the person who gives advice to our government about 5G. She actually doesn't live very far from me, and it's not one of those things that everybody knows about. And on that one, I got no comments at all. And I think what happened was that people sat back and listened to what that is. There's other subjects where you actually lean forward and then you join in the conversation. That's what I see on podcasts.
Mm.
And I think this has been a sit back and absorb and sponge it in, because most of the people that come along are well, everybody who's come along. Can you answer that for us?
Yes, sorry.
It's a cold call, is it, Adam?
It's
Wow. So just to add to what they were saying, Doug, this has been one of the most informative sessions.
Thanks, Doug. It's been
had.
excellent.
And
Brilliant.
we learned a lot, but more so than just learning, it's that epiphany, that eye-opening. Now I'm curious. Now I want to learn more, and I want to thank you for that. Thank you to the audience for being here, being a part of it. Thank you for the comments. Thank you for the questions. Thank you to the panel for being a part of this.
And thank you, Rob, for finding Doug and getting him along.
Well, it's been my pleasure. I've had the opportunity to speak with him once before. I've had him on the show now. I look forward to the next time that we get to speak as well. So, Doug, from all of us here at the Digital Download, thank you very much for being
Thank you, Doug. Really appreciate it.
You're all very welcome. I'm glad I could provide useful information for you.
Yeah.
So this has been the Digital Download, the longest running weekly business talk show on LinkedIn Live. If you have something to say, if you want to appear, we'd love to hear from you. You can find us at digitaldownload.live and click on the Be Our Guest section. You can also scan the QR code on screen. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to have you a part of the show.
Can I ask Doug one final question?
Please.
Doug, what are you drinking?
Green tea.
Okay, right.
Matcha. I'm focusing on losing a little bit of weight, and so I find that matcha helps as an appetite suppressant.
Right.
Yeah, it ruins your taste for everything.
It might, but that's okay.
Again, Doug, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Doug. Appreciate it.
And to everyone else, we will see you again next week.
Have a good week.